Hello, welcome to the first episode of the Real Film podcast. My name's Phil. I've got, what's your name again? I forgot who you are.
I'm Corey.
Corey, oh yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, the other guy who runs Real with me. I forgot about that. And we have just finished the 2 weeks of the BFI London Film Festival, where we were press delegates for it. We didn't manage to catch everything, but we got as much as we possibly could. So should we start off with what we thought was like the best? So I don't know if you've got one particular best festival film in mind, but what would you say were some of them for you at least?
I mean, we've both watched obviously Mangrove, but I think the one that stuck with me surprisingly all the way through was The Painter and the Thief.
That was on the first day as well, wasn't it? Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this before, is that I'm not really someone who's watched loads of documentaries. I don't particularly, unless it's about a subject that I'm deeply interested in, I'm not going to watch it. But this festival, it kind of forced me to watch them, which was nice. But Painter and the Thief, it was really, really well told. And I think there's a bit of a divide between the documentaries in the festival, where you've got half that don't need the flash because the story is very important, and you've got half that seem to actually just technically be really nice. And I think Painter and the Thief falls into the latter category. But yeah, it was just such a beautiful tale.
So what was the story of it?
Essentially, it was a Czech painter who lives in Sweden. Denmark. I think Denmark. Yeah, essentially she has two of her most prized paintings stolen. And it's not really about investigation. They know who's done it, and she basically says to the one of the thieves, "Can I paint you when you're out of prison?" Basically, and then they become friends. And it's not like at first it comes across like she's almost being like sympathetic towards this guy who's he was a drug addict and all that, but it's more about mutual respect and mutual problems, and about how both of them start to help each other navigate their own lives.
Yeah.
And it's just really beautifully told. And then this whole thing about the missing paintings, because he doesn't know, he was so hopped up on drugs and stuff, he doesn't know where he put the painting.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's that whole thing about looming, that looming over the top of both of them. And then the ending, not the ending, I'd say just before the ending, it was like if it starts to lose you a little bit, it kind of just brings it back with these paintings that are missing. I think it's just really nice. It's just really well told. I think it's just two people, not really about the fact that they're connected by this painting and, stolen paintings, but I think it's more about just two people trying to help each other through life, because it's pretty shit.
I was going to say, one of the films that really, really stuck with me, it was one of the first ones I watched was Mangrove, the one that you just mentioned. This Steve McQueen film that's part of that Small Axe series that he's doing for the BBC, where he's doing a series of feature-length documentaries. A couple of them were at the festival. And I think Mangrove really, really stuck with me, not just because it's Steve McQueen. He's never really made a bad film.
No.
It's not just that. I think a lot of the festival had this sort of there's quite a lot of social issues running through it at the moment. One of the big ones is sort of the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that. And Small Axe is sort of trying to tackle some of those issues. And what I thought was really powerful about Mangrove is that it's about this case in sort of the late 60s about a group of black people who are being unfairly treated by the police. So they start a protest to try and get a bit more fairer treatment, and it all goes wrong. And then it's about the true story of their case in court. And I thought it was very sort of prescient, because it feels like it could be today. I wrote because I was the one who wrote the review for it, and I mentioned in my review that I feel like they've toned down some of the language on purpose to make it feel more contemporary. I feel like they've tried to tone down some of the racist, just overtly racist things that they say. To make it feel more contemporary, to make it feel like, although we have progressed quite a lot since then, we've still got a lot to do just on a societal level. It's still quite systematically racist.
Well, I think Steve McQueen said that it's a celebration of black victory and black culture.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important, because with the place we're in now, where institutional racism is still a massive thing, they're creative an artistic side has to be the way to open to people's eyes.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Steve McQueen, I can't really think of a better director to do it.
No, absolutely not. And
because some of the stuff he's well known for, these like long takes, the one in when he's put into a cell.
yeah, that one. Yeah, when he's sort of just screaming about the evil and wicked men that put him there. I just think that's it's so powerful, because all he's doing is just a low down shot, basically in the cell door.
Yeah,
just of him just having this sort of emotional outburst of just like he doesn't know what to do. Like, I feel like that's quite a lot of what the film is about. There's a take at the end when you get the verdict, and it's doing like a really, really long zoom in on his face as it slowly goes, like says their name and then says the 2 charges, not guilty, and then he just starts crying and just like
that
the
performance in that particular scene as well.
Outstanding. I mean, he's fantastic. Everyone's fantastic, but he's I thought he was especially fantastic.
Yeah.
I thought as well, just talking about the long takes, McQueen is great at long takes, but one reason why I think Mangrove stuck with me so much is like McQueen's got this knack for making, very important films like 12 Years a Slave and things like that, but I always find that they are quite tough watches. And I said this to you before, that Mangrove I thought was so watchable, like, because they just fill it full of character and personality. Like, from the outgo, you get Frank Critchlow, he's walking through Notting Hill to his restaurant, the Mangrove, and it's just so full of life and character and personality. And you have so many long takes of like one of my favourite ones is when it comes out of the restaurant and they're all partying on the street, and it's just pure joy. It's just pure joy. I think, that one really, really stuck with me a lot.
Well, I think, like we've said, I mean, the festival, the films, all seem to follow a similar sort of themes and about what they're about. Whether it's racism, whether it's class. One for me that as well was Farewell and More. Because I didn't know that much about it actually when I was going into it. Obviously, before we started the festival, there was ones that we were keeping our eyes on. But this one, it kind of took me by surprise. Essentially, it's about Angolan immigrants, and the husband and the father. He already lives in New York, and then his family. He finally gets enough money to bring his family, which is his wife and his daughter. But they haven't seen him in 17 years. So essentially, they're almost having to build a whole new relationship. And obviously, he's been there 17 years, so he has his own life in a way here as well. But the best thing the film does is it separates it into 3 chapters, all for each character. Because it's very easy to kind of get lost in this. They're all in the same thing, but they all have their own personal things they're trying to get over. The daughter, she's trying to find her voice, but she's also trying to represent really well as well. And because the fathers and the daughters are the first 2, you do start to write off the mother. She's very religious, and she just kind of wants everything to work out. But then when it gets to hers, she's probably the one who's dealing with the most. I mean, she hasn't seen her husband in 17 years. Her daughter, she feels like she's slowly losing her daughter to this country. And she's kind of set in her ways, basically. But yeah, I just think it's a very important way to kind of turn something that has like a big picture theme and turn it into a very individual story. I think that's just really great. And there was a lot of great movies like that, but that one stood out specifically for me, I think.
I was just thinking about like there was like you mentioned, like the sort of different documentaries. I thought there was a ton of documentaries that really stuck out to me, and like I think it was just a great year for documentaries. And then so the one that stuck with me the most was The Reason I Jump. It's about non-verbal autistic people sort of all around the world. And it's the one that's based on the book by the 13-year-old kid in Japan. Now, I didn't realise this until I started writing my review, that there is actually a bit of controversy about whether or not he wrote the book.
Okay.
Because it's basically someone took what he wrote and then sort of turned it into a book. Took what he said and turned it into a book. And a lot of people have just contested that it's more about, like, I read one thing that basically said it comes across more like what a parent would want their kid to think than, what they actually think they've written. But I'm not here to debate whether or not the book is legit. No. The film is just a very just insanely good documentary, basically. Really I don't know how else to because essentially what it is, you follow these 5. It's centering on 5 non-verbal autistic people all around the world. So you have the US, you have the UK. There's the very affecting one in Sierra Leone.
Yeah, that's
which is very it's very emotional watching that, but it just shows you how the parents deal with it and how these, and then, but I think one of the reasons why the doc is so good is because it isn't just interviewing the parents and showing you how the kids live. It has a very sort of immersive side to it. That's what I've seen a lot of people describe it as. It's an immersive documentary, because what it does is it uses the sort of audio and visualness of the film to try and get you to understand what these people are experiencing. One of the moments that I felt was most sort of reflective of that was when they're interviewing the mum of, I can't remember what his name is. He's the one who has the friend in America. It's the two friends, and she's being interviewed in the kitchen, and he's sat in the dining room in a separate room completely. And when it cuts to him, the mum's voice goes muffled, and you can't really hear the interview. And then he puts his hands over his ears, and it goes even more muffled. And it does things like this to really, really sort of get you to sort of try and understand them more. And then sort of brings in this narration so it's narration from the book, but then they use footage of a nonverbal autistic child from Japan on the seafront, and then again they use these like extreme close-ups to sort of try and make this more sensory sort of cinematic experience. But I thought it was very effective.
Well, it comes back to that sort of like film language kind of thing, and how a film communicates to its audience. You know, it's trying to actually communicate a completely different language to us the best it can, because we are never going to understand that world.
No.
But what the film's trying to do is give us some kind of insight to know what they're going through.
I think
just think the way it's done is just so good. And again, it's another one that I wasn't expecting.
Yes.
It was just very, very good to watch.
There's very few films I went into this festival that I was actually expecting to be really good. So one that I did expect to be really good and lived up to that was Wolf Walkers, which was the one by Cartoon Saloon, who's the Irish animation studio who were behind The Breadwinner and Song of the Sea. Yeah. So there was another film they did, I can't remember what it was called, that they sort of rounded off their Irish mythology trilogy. Wolf Walkers is rounding off this trilogy. This is their own their fourth film.
Oh, Secret of the Kells.
So the asset, Secret of the Kells, and the previous three have all been nominated for Oscars, and I really wouldn't be surprised if Wolf Walkers is too. It's very, it's, I haven't quite decided whether or not I think it's their best film yet. But I think it's their most watchable. It's their most fun to watch. It's just, there's a couple of bits here and there that sort of stuck, and there's like a little bit of clunky dialogue, and then there's a little bit of it. Occasionally, you think it's a little bit like an Irish version of Princess Mononoke, but that's only for the first like quarter, if that. And then when it sort of gets into its own and starts to develop its own sort of Irish mythology, it just becomes its own beast entirely.
Yeah.
And it's the animation is just outstanding. They've got this really, really good knack of creating this really sort of, like, you have these 2D characters, and then this space behind them, like their backgrounds are all 2D as well, but they have such an excellent use of that background. Then there's only one example I felt like it didn't work as well as when, because it was a little bit disorientating, was when they're standing on the edge of the woods and you've got this town behind them. It takes you a couple of seconds to realise what you're looking at, but apart from that, I mean, it's literally like a 5-second shot, and then the rest of the film is just stunning, and there's this really, really lovely motif of sort of circles throughout. So like essentially the brief story is a English girl and her dad moved to Kilkenny in Ireland in like 1650. They're hired to kill the wolves on the edge in this forest on the edge of this town. The townspeople aren't very welcoming to them. This is the age of Oliver Cromwell invading Ireland. So, they aren't very welcoming. She really wants to be a hunter, but she's sent to, work in the kitchen and do all the cleaning and stuff like that. And then she meets Mabe, who's a wolf walker. She's the daughter of a wolf walker, and they sort of run this wolf pack. But how it works is when they're awake, they are human, and then when they fall asleep, they become a wolf in their sleep. There's a nice little, I don't know if it's necessarily a twist. I think the way I would describe it is a diversion of the narrative, because I don't think it's necessarily unexpected, but the narrative could go like one of two ways. But then this thing happens and he goes, right, we're going to go this way now. And the way that that's portrayed visually is incredibly interesting. As I say, this motif of circles throughout is really, really good as well. The pack of wolves is constantly like, they're very, very rarely individual wolves. They're quite often sort of like molded into one. And then when they're running, there's this almost wave-like animation following them as they sort of circle the wolf walkers. And I just think it's an incredibly interesting film. It has some minor moments that I think with a bit more experience the studio could have ironed out, and I think it's a tad too long, but these are all minor complaints for a film which is just really bloody excellent.
Well, I mean, I wrote a article, just 7 great animation movies.
Yeah.
And Secret of the Kells was on there.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that the production company, they're on their way to coming kind of like the low key figures of animation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because every film they've made is really good.
Yeah.
It's not like fantastic. It's at least great.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's just a shame they don't make them very often. I mean,
Breadwinner was 2017.
18, 17, one of them.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But I mean, Secret of the Kells was 2009. Song of the Sea was 2015. So there's a very big gap even between them.
Yeah, so they've done 4 films in 11 years.
But makes me very excited for what they're going to do in the future.
What I think is really interesting about something that Wolfwalkers did that I think that it has been present in their other films, but I think is done, at least I thought, better in Wolfwalkers, was really embracing the Irish sort of mythology of it, because I haven't seen essentially that. Like, at first you think, oh, this is going to be an Irish version of Princess Mononoke because it's about wolves and so getting one with nature and all things like that. But it just becomes its own thing entirely and really explores some stuff that I found fascinating.
So, like, one we both obviously loved was Possessor by Brandon Cronenberg, not David Cronenberg.
Son of David Cronenberg.
And what's really interesting is, I think, for me, why I liked it is that you get the Cronenberg stuff.
Yeah.
It's there, you understand it, but Brandon's sort of forging his own kind of, it's almost mystical element to it, like just the tone of it. Cronenberg, obviously, David Cronenberg, we've spoken about this before. Sometimes they can get a bit lost in the body horror.
Yeah, I think sometimes, although we both said about how David Cronenberg is a superb filmmaker, but I think sometimes he does go a little bit of style over substance.
Yeah, whereas with this, it was also like deeply psychological.
Yes.
And I mean, weird is another great word to use. But good weird.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting. Again, it's not a twisty film.
No.
But you could describe it as twisty-turny because you don't know where the narrative is going to go.
Yeah.
It's so like the sort of basic plot. The best way of describing it is you've got this company who are hired to assassinate people, and they have this machine that allows their, what would you call them, agents, I guess?
Yeah, I guess you would.
Yeah, to possess the body of someone. And then so how they use it is they possess the body of someone near to the person they want to assassinate, and then they assassinate the person and usually kill themselves as well. So like the agent we follow is Andrea Riseborough, who plays Voss, and she's got this family that she's been really disconnected from, and the opening scene is her killing someone and then struggling to kill herself. And then sort of allowing the police to shoot, her person, the possessed dead. And I think that sets up quite an interesting dynamic for it going forward, because she has a bit of a strange relationship with the people that she kills, because she's given a gun, but she stabs the victims. And there's a really messed up sort of little subplot of her almost enjoying what she does. Like, she just likes to toy with the people before she properly kills them.
I think it's like the perfect setup as well.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
It's weird and intriguing, but at the same time, she obviously is struggling to also kind of hold on to, the takeover essentially. She's struggling to stay in that without then sort of becoming almost self-aware.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the trajectory of the movie goes.
Yeah.
And it's really well performed.
So I think Christopher Abbott is also excellent in it, who plays Colin. That's the second person she then takes over. We follow for, like, the majority of the film, we follow Colin as he's been taken over by Voss. And something that I thought was something I didn't expect to be as visually interesting was the actual sort of taking over sequence. That is so, like, that's like David Cronenberg's influence in there. But
it's almost like reverse shooting the melting of plastic is what it looked like to me.
That's it. Because it sort of like, there's that really sort of like her, because if I remember rightly, it's her body that then sort of melts upwards. And then it melts onto his body, doesn't it? But it's like a skin suit, isn't it? It's like a skin suit. There's nothing inside it. And then it as you say, melts. Her one melts upwards and then melts down onto his one. But there's this. I mean, there's such an incredible visual. I absolutely loved the visual of the sort of battle going on in his head when it's flickering, like that sequence when he's laid on the bed and it keeps flicking like into red and not red, and you can see him walking into the room. And like to sort of, and she's laid on the bed, and that sort of visual of like that's what's going on in the head. And
it's just like at every point when Cronenberg needs to shoot sort of this like dismantling of what's going on in his head, he does it so well.
I think visually it's like you're always told in like film school and stuff to show not tell, and I think it's such a great example of showing and not telling. Like all of that stuff that's going on, you don't hear her going, oh no, he's starting to take over or anything like that. You just I mean, the performance would be better than that. But I
would actually want to see that more. Someone with that
oh no, he's taking over. But no, it's like the visual of it is incredible too. And it's got a pretty tight runtime as well, I think. I think it's only about 140, 150. But it flies, for the fact it's such a slow pace, it flies by.
I'd have to say that I guess to some people it's probably an acquired taste. It's pretty grotesque, some of it, and pretty brutal.
There's a particular bit in the middle. Without spoilers, there's a particular scene in the middle that I think is very. It does get borderline like excessively gross, but I think some of that comes from his sort of father's inspiration. David Cronenberg, but I don't think it gets to the point
I think for the most part, it's for a good reason. Like it's not done for just because he's like got a thirst for. No.
I feel like it's showing character, isn't it? Like it's and that becomes the undoing of it as well, which I think is really, really fascinating. But I mean, I think that's sort of covered the films that we were going in expecting to be good or just the best ones of the festival. So for you, what were some unexpectedly good films?
Well, I'd say Farewell and More is one of those.
Yeah, for sure. But that's obviously one of the best ones.
Anyway. Yeah, it is part of the best ones. I think for me, there's probably 3, I would say. The first one I watched was 200 Meters, which is essentially about a father and a husband who lives on the Palestinian side of the border, and his family live on the Israeli side. And basically, in order to work and to see his family, he has to go through this like exhausting border control and stuff like that. And obviously, there's a lot of heat between the two countries. But then his son is hit by a car, and his ID gets revoked. So he has to, he has to be smuggled into Israel. And I just wasn't expecting how much of like a thriller it was going to be. Because essentially it's quite a slow burning start, it's just building character, it's building his family, his work situation, and that's fine, and it's good. But then as soon as he eventually finds someone to smuggle them into the country, it's just a long string of almost like an adventure film that's just increasingly tense. And I know there's obviously, it's meant to be a little bit of between the countries conflict, but got a really good way of sort of projecting that onto side characters rather than letting it, ruin the main story. So there's essentially by the end, he's with a German woman who is there documenting with another Palestinian, and he's there with a kid as well. And the way in which the conflict kind of is put onto those is that there's a bit of we're not sure, she's German, but there's a bit of confusion about where her parents are from. And in the end, it's kind of just like the guy, he kind of just says, well, who cares, I just need to get to this point, and that's his main focus. But it's really good. It's really good for the character as well. And I just wasn't expecting how entertaining it was going to be. Because, you hear something like that, and you kind of, while it would be a good film, but you're kind of expecting it to be kind of more of a slow burner. But no, some of the tensest stuff that I saw in the entire festival, by far. It was really fantastic, honestly. But I would say that, and I think for both of us, would be David Byrne's American Utopia. Yeah,
American Utopia was certainly something, wasn't it? So, I mean, going into it, we both knew, I knew who David Byrne was. Did you know who David Byrne was?
I did,
yeah. Lead singer of Talking Heads. I knew literally nothing other than who David Byrne was, and that Spike Lee directed it. I was aware it was like it was a concert film, it was a Broadway, I don't know. But essentially what it is that it's a Broadway musical that got recorded by Spike Lee in 2019. But what American Utopia is an album that David Byrne made a few years ago that he then adapted into this musical, added in some other songs that he did by himself and with Talking Heads and stuff like that, and just made something. I don't know. I think we both
don't even know what it is really.
No, I think we're both on the same sort of plate that we don't know what the sort of story is. I don't think there is a story, is there? No. It's just songs. And it's just there's just bits in between where he's just talking to the crowd, that sort of contextualising the songs and sort of talking about. I feel like it's just David Byrne, it's David Byrne the show. It's just him letting his opinions out and his favourite songs out and just having a bit of fun. But then has this strange visual on stage of so every musician is on stage with him, and then there's a couple of dancers as well who both sing. And everyone, including David Byrne, is wearing an identical grey suit, like grey trousers, grey jacket, grey shirt, and no shoes and socks. It's a really odd visual. The lights are used really, really well to emphasise different points. There's that bit because there's sort of around the left and right sides and the back. There's that sort of chain hanging. I don't really know what it is. The best way I describe it is, remember when your nan. You go to your nan's and there wasn't a door and door frame, and they just had
beads.
The beads hanging. It looked a little bit like a grey version of that.
Yeah.
But one of the, I can't remember what song it is, but there's that song where David Byrne and the two dancers are hopping, they're lighting up certain squares all over the place, and they're hopping from square to square.
Yeah.
I thought that was really visually interesting. It's just a bit nuts.
Yeah, it is. Well, I said in the review is that at first it kind of feels like, well, unless you're a Talking Heads fanatic, you're not going to go and see this show.
Yeah.
But I think that's the most we also communicated while both watching the film as well. How much fun we were having. Yeah,
most of the time was I don't know what I'm watching, but I'm loving it. Yeah. That was most of the communication between us.
You can try and dissect it all. I know that it's called American Utopia, and whatever they're wearing is very dystopian, I guess.
Yeah.
With the sort of pale grey suits, almost like cloning.
Yeah.
But I think you just got to sit and enjoy it.
Yeah,
by the end, you don't care what you're watching. It's just so good.
It's just so much fun. He is nuts. He's absolutely nuts, but he's having a great time. It has a nice political message at the end.
Yeah.
When it starts running through.
I think we obviously questioned as well why exactly Spike Lee was directing it.
And then there's the sequence of them reading out people who've the people in America who've died to police brutality.
Yeah.
And it suddenly becomes clear why Spike Lee is directing this, because that sort of feels like the message coming out the other end.
Yeah.
But one thing I thought was really odd, I don't know about you, is right at the end, after the show's finished and it's telling you who's who, and they're just cycling around New York with a GoPro on the front of their bike.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really weird. It'd go on to a person for about 2 seconds. They'd be instrumentalist or singer or whatever. It's just odd. But
I guess with the political message and sort of that sort of thing where he's talking about connecting to people and connecting to people being the most important thing.
Yeah.
I think it does make sense as a whole. I'm still not 100% sure what's going on all the time, but
It's
there
just
is a
great
sense.
fun.
It's not like incoherent.
No,
You're
no,
just
no,
having
no.
such a good time, and you can see
Yeah.
the people in the crowd having a good time as well.
Especially, what's the Talking Head song that makes everyone go fucking mad? Once in a Lifetime, is that what it's called?
Yeah, it does. They go crazy
When
for it.
everyone goes absolutely, and they're all jumping up and down
Yeah.
and dancing and stuff, and it just looks like everyone's having a good time.
Yeah,
And I had a good time.
I had a great
Watch
time.
it. It was great. It was
I've
very
never
enjoyable.
watched the film and basically danced for the entire.
Yeah, just taps your foot
Yeah.
all the way long. So hopping back to the documentaries, I really liked Ultraviolence.
Yeah,
I didn't think it was perfect. I thought it was. It's not the kind of film that you. I felt like it was. It thought it was the kind of film that you could show someone who disagrees with the morals to try and convince them that that's. If so, essentially, what it is about people dying in police custody in the UK, and it's a follow up from the director Ken Farrow's documentary Injustice of 2001. That it basically got him blacklisted from making films for a while because he got his hands on footage and stuff that he wasn't supposed to get, particularly from the Met Police, and they basically just tried to bury his career. And so, like, the film's never been shown on TV. No TV channel would ever pick it up because it sort of highlights this thing that I think people just want to pretend isn't there, that the police aren't perfect and they do accidentally and purposefully kill people in custody sometimes. And I think if you were talking to someone who wasn't aware of this issue or was on the other side of the issue that these police officers aren't guilty, this isn't the film you would show them. But I think it thinks it is. That this film thinks it's
thinks it's like a convincer, basically.
Yeah, but I think it's too biased.
Yeah.
It doesn't have, like, I feel like, because even Ken Farrow narrates it, he's sort of writing a letter to his son about, there's that sort of recurring motif throughout of the Endless Campaign. He uses these massive, bold titles to sort of, like, they just slap right, they sort of emphasises certain elements. And the Endless campaign keeps recurring. And sort of that's the message that you get that he's getting to his son, is that, they've been fighting this for a while. But it's the next generation that's going to have to continue this fight.
I think that's what, for me, was very good. Is that just a really intriguing way to create, like, the documentary almost, like, visually, because it's very noughties.
Yes, well, that's so just to contextualise that a little bit before you make your point, is that most of it was shot between 2005 and 2007. With stories that are about the same sort of time as Injustice up until about 2007, but it's only got released recently. Which is really interesting. I think
it is like watching sort of a blast from the past, I guess. But, I think the story of him talking to his son is, we are basically his son in this scenario. Where it is up to us. They have tried, and they obviously haven't been doing great. But it's up to us to carry that on, because otherwise it's never going to change.
Well, I think the scariest statistic he says is that from 1969 to 1999, 2,000 people died in police custody, and only one police officer ever got convicted of it. And that's the one who went into a cell and stamped on someone's chest so hard that it collapsed. I think it collapsed a lung, destroyed a kidney, and severed another organ in their body.
I don't know why that's what it takes.
That's the awful thing, is there's two sequences in it that are incredibly disturbing. It sort of centres around a few families, but there's two that it follows in particular, families of the people who've died in police custody. And there's the guy who's brought in. He was in hospital, and they were trying to. He had an injury to the back of his head, and they were trying to X-ray him, and they called the police because he was, fighting against it. And instead of the police trying to help them do it there, they just bring him into the police station. The CCTV you see is obviously them dragging him in, and by this point I don't think he's unconscious, but he's not moving. we don't see the entire 11-minute clip, but there is an 11-minute clip out there of basically where they put him down and you can hear him breathing quite difficultly and groaning and things like this. And these police officers just leave him there, just in the middle of this. I don't know what it is, just like an entranceway to the station, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. And they just let him die. They just leave him to die.
Yeah.
You can hear them laughing and joking and just casually going about their way,
Yeah.
suddenly realising that he stopped breathing. And then they go, they check his pulse. He's got no pulse. He's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it. And that's all he gets. And there's another sequence that's very similar to that. I won't stay on this film for too long, but essentially it's just very, very moving. It just kind of shows that not everyone's perfect. There are situations in this where there are people to blame, but there's also miscommunication and not enough training around this sort of stuff. Like, I believe it was that case and not the other one where the guy 2 or 3 years later, one of the police officers involved got arrested for he got fired and arrested for racially motivated aggression towards a black man. I can't remember exactly what the phrase is, but I think he called him a silly black cunt, something like that.
Yeah.
Started beating him on the floor. And that's what it took to get the guy kicked off the force.
Yeah.
And no one involved in, this gentleman dying in the middle of the police station ever got convicted, or I don't even think they got indicted. I don't even think, well, not indicted, but I don't think anyone even got charged. I think it's a pretty horrible film in its sort of subject matter, but I think it's very powerful, and I think it's important to watch because in this day and age where I think Ken Farrow even said himself, one of the reasons why he released the film now is because there's so much movement for this sort of thing with like the Black Lives Matter and everything like that coming out, and people just being more sort of empowered to try and make systematic change.
Yeah.
He said that this is the time for, it's one of the reasons why I hadn't released it yet, because he didn't know who the film was for. He'd made this film and didn't know what audience it was going to reach, and he kind of was waiting for the right time for the audience to appreciate it. And I think he has released it. I think doing that has, I feel like if you released it 5-10 years ago, it'd sort of just be a bit lost and be claimed as a bit radical, but I think now you can appreciate it more.
Definitely.
Another documentary I actually really ended up liking, we're changing, this is completely different tones here, is One Man and His Shoes, the one about Michael Jordan and Nike, about how Jordan sort of and Nike made their partnership and then made this multi-billion-dollar business out of it. I don't think there's a whole lot to be said about it. It isn't like Ultra-Violence or Painter and the Thief or something like that. You couldn't talk about it for hours and hours and hours. But I think it's a really fascinating film because I think that what I got out the other end of it is that it's made for, sneakerheads, people who love the culture of sneakers and shoes.
Yeah.
And the first half, 2/3 of the film is geared at, here's the story, here's stuff you probably didn't know, here's interviewing tons of people involved, and it's just making this really super fun, it's super kinetic and stuff like that. And then it slowly starts turning into, it brings it into a more contemporary context, and then slowly starts turning it into an argument where people need to realise how irresponsible Nike and Jordan have been in creating, they essentially started the hype culture around shoes, and they made it so kids, especially young black teenagers, felt like they needed the shoes. And in doing so, there's been something like 200 or 300 people that have died as a result of Jordans specifically, the Jordan shoes specifically. They have been killed for their shoes.
Wow.
And it takes this more serious tone where it starts to say, sure, it's fun to have sneakers and stuff, but Nike and Jordan created this culture that is toxic and it's damaging to many people, not just the people who've lost their lives, but to the communities as well. And this whole, they always don't create enough of the, where it's not just Jordan specifically now, it's Nike as well. When
it's that limited edition kind of.
They constantly create shoes and stuff that aren't never in enough quantity, so there's always this hype around it. And it's sort of why I think the film is aimed at sneakerheads is because for the first half it's this really, really fun unearthing all this really cool stuff and tells this really interesting tale. But by the end of it, it's being like, this culture can be really damaging and you need to take a more serious look at this. And Jordan and Nike need to take more responsibility for their actions.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really, really interesting sort of dissection of that. And I think it comes in at like 1 hour and 10 minutes or something like that. It's a really short runtime. It's super kinetic. I'd recommend it for most people, but it's definitely aimed at sneakerheads and people who find Jordan shoes, who like Jordan shoes. So,
Well, I mean, I'm glad that it does take that sort of direction.
Yeah.
Because, live in a world where I want what he's got.
Yeah.
No, and sometimes that can be deadly.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. I mean, there's a couple of, they interview a couple of people who, you see the video of a car that, so basically someone shot a guy as he was driving back home, and you see the crashed car with all the spinning wheels and stuff, the body's still inside there, and he was killed because he took pictures with his shoes, and someone wanted those shoes. Yeah. So they literally just shot him. It's just bonkers. I think like that stuff is, and this is just interesting highlighting that stuff because, I mean, I like the shoes. I'm not super into. I'm not like the craziest nut in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, they meet a guy who has almost every single pair of Jordan shoes ever made, like a copy of every single Jordan shoe ever made. He had something like, I think it was over 1,000 shoes. It was like 1,500 pairs of Jordans. And I feel like the film is made for that, more like that kind of person who is just completely rose tinted and, shutters on his vision of the whole thing.
He needs an eye into the sort of culture that they are
a part of. Yeah, exactly. And I just think it was really interesting. I think it's worth watching.
Well, I mean, if we go back to sort of the feature films, obviously, I would actually say that documentary has probably been one of the standouts and most surprising thing for me this festival.
And there's been a lot this festival. I wasn't expecting as many documentaries as there actually were.
Yeah, I mean, we talk also about African Apocalypse as well, which
was one of the last films.
Yeah, again, it's one in a way that different kind of the way he structures it.
Yeah.
It's obviously a very intelligent guy.
Yes, yeah.
But the way he sort of links Hearts of Darkness to this real life story to then this almost like expedition that he currently goes on.
Yeah.
It was really good, and again the bit at the end where he finds himself at a Black Lives Matter movement as well. I think that's very good for now. I think
it's very prescient, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's important for people to watch that because it's a reminder of how people still suffer from colonialism. That's what
I'm about to say. I think something, especially UK culture, is really, really terrible at is not highlighting the atrocities of colonialism and the effects it still has today. So it basically follows this, I can't remember what his name, Femi?
Femi, yeah.
Yeah, follows Femi, who's sort of a young activist who's recently out of university, I believe.
Yeah, Oxford,
Yeah, Oxford, yeah. As you say, he's a very intelligent guy, but he wants to know more about his sort of... because his parents are from Nigeria?
His family is from Nigeria.
Nigeria, and it starts in Nigeria, I believe, the expedition he takes. And he's basically following the route of this French, what was he, a general, captain, officer?
He was essentially the guy that was...
leading a colonization across Africa to Lake Chad, so they gain a stronghold and unify French's...
Paul
Voulet, that's it, yeah. To unify French's colonial states in Africa and gain a stronger foothold before the British did. One thing I really loved throughout is how he so much of the narration from Femi is directed at Paul.
Yeah.
And he says Paul, he's talking at Paul. And I think that's so fascinating. So, I mean, it's set, like the expedition takes place in 1899.
Yeah.
And I think it was... seeing the effect it's had on the people and like the atrocities that he did, it's horrifying. Some of the things he did,
disturbing,
incredibly, but the effect it still has on people now. As you said, there's they ask so many. He expects to go there. Like the first time he sits down and talks to someone, he's like, I'm not sure whether or not they're going to know who Valet is, and they could tell him the specifics of exactly what happened in the battle, because their great grandparents were the people that were affected by it, and they told their children who told their children. And it's just the information's constantly passed on because they know they don't want people to forget it. Because something he talks about, especially towards the end, is how France has forgotten it, or at least the people he talks to. Sorry,
French people want to forget it almost.
Yes, yeah, they want to just sort of cover it up, sweep it up the rug, and forget it because it's atrocious.
Yeah,
I think it's very moving.
Yeah. I think to go back to what you were saying, how he always refers, it's almost like he's talking to Paul.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. It's really important he does that because it's almost like, I mean, this guy's been dead for a very long time, but he's still trying to give some accountability for his actions.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, he has to talk to him directly, and in the process talk to, people who just don't know this happened.
Yeah.
I know I spoke a little bit about, when we first watched it, I spoke a little bit about how there's a particular bit where Femi and his guides...
I know exactly what you said.
They talk about how he seems to not really be that emotional when people talk to him. And he sort of says, I guess I'm just not like he's kind of a bit overwhelming if that. And at first I kind of thought it was going to go to this direction. I don't know if it's just in my head where narratively I thought it was just going to go.
Yeah.
But I was expecting to see him get quite upset in a particular part. But I can't moan about the fact that, I mean, he's gone on this journey, he obviously cares. Like, just because I didn't see him cry, it's not like he doesn't care. It's just where I thought in my head it was going to go.
And it didn't, He doesn't have this emotional outburst in there. But
you hear that kind of information that he's being told, you wouldn't know how to handle that.
No, I think I said this to you, I feel like he never says it, which may think I'm wrong here, but I feel like he's just completely overwhelmed by it because, we talk about these acts being really, really horrible, but we're watching it in a documentary. Whenever you hear about anything awful and disgusting like this, you're watching a documentary, but you're laying in bed, or on your sofa, or whatever, and this is awful. He's actually in these places talking to the people that have been affected by it, and there's that moment. Do you remember the where they have the tape of the woman who was interviewed in the 70s that was held captive by Paul Villay, and she talks about the horrible and disgusting things he did. He's actually hearing the voice of someone who was affected by it, and he's there with their surviving family, which as you go through you realise how much of a sort of bottleneck he created in these areas of the world. They talk about how Nigeria is one of the most underdeveloped countries in the world. And a big part of that is probably due to Villay because he just killed so many people. It just comes down to he brutally murdered so many people that they just couldn't cope with the expansion.
I mean, there's a particular scene as well. I mean, there's a lot of scenes that are pretty moving. But the one where he's talking to the children, who are still getting extremely emotional about the fact that Villay has wiped out a lot of people, their ancestors. It's almost like people who are still growing up there have a less sense of identity because this person literally came and wiped out, I think, I'm not correct if I'm wrong, I think they said about 10 million people's worth of this population. Which is crazy.
It's absurd. And something that was really moving about that sequence as well is when he's talking to them about because basically they created, what he was doing was creating a road between Nigeria and Nigeria, and he talks about, do you not think it's at least, there's something to be said about the fact that you've got this road that makes it easier to get to Nigeria, and they talk, we don't need the road. It's a horrible reminder of what happened. That road was created by this atrocious human being, and it's a constant reminder to them of what happened. And I think it's a very important film for people to watch because it just shows you that we as developers, it's not just France, it's the UK as well, and any country that colonised Africa committed atrocious acts, and our countries have just decided to sweep it under a rug and forget about it. And we shouldn't. We should remember what happened.
It's definitely very important. I think sort of maybe it's sort of the intelligence and just the interest of obviously Hearts of Darkness as well. I think it's really nice to have that sort of connection to that as well. Especially when there's like a narrator sort of almost like reading a book as the documentary goes on. You realise because wasn't Heart Darkness released a year before Villay went on this expedition, or they were very, very close.
Because I think what was the interesting thing is the strange sort of similarity between Heart of Darkness and Kurtz and Voulet, but it wasn't based on Voulet.
No.
They were just incredibly close, and I think...
well, we've talked a lot about sort of the documentaries, and obviously very important. Is there any sort of like your narrative feature films that kind of stood out to you?
One that stood out to me, not always for good reasons, was Kajillionaire.
Yeah.
I think we both spoke about Kajillionaire. It was actually probably the only film that disappointed me a little bit.
I would agree with that as well.
Because I remember watching...
To some degree.
Yeah, it's not like it's an awful film, but I remember watching the trailer, and you know me, I like my indie cinema, I love a good quirky indie film. I think usually it's a good way to sort of gauge on who's going to make some really interesting cinema in the next few years, and I just love watching a fun, usually offbeat, fun, silly film with a nice sort of core. I think Kajillionaire has that. But it also has some really fucking weird elements. Like, it as I think you described it, it just gets too quirky for its own good at some points.
Yeah, kind of caves in on its own quirky.
Yeah, so how would you describe the narrative? Because it's an odd one.
So essentially it's a quirky family, you could say.
Quirky is a word that's going to be used to describe a lot of this film because there's no other word to describe
essentially it. It's two older parents and their daughter who's 25, 26, whose age you honestly couldn't tell. Could be 17, could be 35. She says
26.
Yeah, but
she says 26.
When you look at her, you just don't. You just wouldn't be able to tell.
There's something when they lay out the presents, and she's like, "Oh, are you not 18 yet? 'Cause there's no 18 birthday." Yeah. And she's like, "No, I'm 26."
Yeah, but essentially they coast through life on small cons, ones that keep them off the grid, all because of sort of parents' sort of outlook on being a part of the system and stuff like that. And essentially that kind of dynamic is interrupted at first, I would say, by Gina Rodriguez's character, who
she's fantastic in it.
She's great, yeah. Who essentially becomes a part of their like cons, some of them, but it's more about Old Dolio is the main character's name.
Yes.
It's essentially more about her and the fact that she's sort of grown up almost without just parental sort of affection.
Yeah.
But for me, that's actually some of the best things that the movie does.
Yeah.
Is that she's not that she just doesn't get it very often.
It's not as
she
completely
flat out
absent.
doesn't know how to react to it.
It's like very early on when Gina Rodriguez was brought in, she says to Old Dolio, "How do you know them?" She's like, "They're my parents." Like there's that, but she's been there for like 10-15 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
She's seen their dynamic and she just doesn't get that they're even related.
Yeah.
There's just complete, as you said, it's just complete absence of any parental sort of guidance at all.
I will say as well, the bits like where she dances. I'm doing air quotes because it's not really a dance. It's more. I'm not really sure what it is. Oh, it's the weird sort of moves she does before she goes into the post office, and when she finally gets this opportunity to dance.
Yeah.
It's that. But I think that's actually quite an effective way.
Yes.
To show in all the weirdness.
Yeah.
Like how important that moment is. But like I said, it does occasionally cave in on its own quirkiness.
It does. There's like I've mentioned about. There's that sort of hot tub bit. There's a couple of scenes that have a hot tub in it, and the last sort of scene in the hot tub, I just think I've said this to you, I think you could take that scene out completely. It's about 10 minutes long. You could take it out and literally nothing will change. It doesn't have any effect on the narrative. It's just really odd.
Well, I mean, after that, Old Dolio comes in and then starts, asking her mother to call her hun.
Yeah.
And
then the whole thing's just forgotten.
Yeah, then Gina Rodriguez is just like, "I'll call you hun," and then walks out with her.
Yeah.
And they go and
then they go to the gas station, which is where you have the best sequence in the film, because there's this recurring thing of like minor earthquakes coming out, and the father keeps saying,
they're waiting for the big one, aren't they?
Yeah, and the father keeps talking about, the big one's coming, but they're in the toilet in the gas station, and the light go out, and she Old Dolio thinks the big one just happens, and then she comes out of the toilet and there's this one unbroken shot. I think it's about 16 minutes long, 15, 16 minutes long, something like that. It's really fucking long. When she comes out and she's had this epiphany, like it's completely changed her outlook on life. And she goes into the gas station, she starts trying to buy things, she doesn't have any money, she comes out and then she has that sort of argument with Gina Rodriguez and stuff like. I think that is incredible, that sequence. Like how I heard that there's something like 17 takes of it. And I think that there's a bit where Rodriguez is on like FaceTiming her mum at the end, and I couldn't just kept imagining in my head her messing up a line and be like blah, 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 and then having to start the whole thing again.
There's a lot of pressure doing a scene like that.
Yeah,
I often think about hunger.
Yeah,
with that sort of conversation that is literally just 16 minutes.
Yeah.
How much they must have prepared for that.
Yeah,
and how angry you'd be at yourself if you messed up.
Yeah. I think that one is. I think that one would be probably more difficult as a performance than the one in Cajillionaire. But I think the one in Cajillionaire requires more of everyone involved because there's a lot of camera movement. The way it goes around the shop when she's going down the aisles to pick up the stuff, I think it would be a nightmare if you were the focus puller in that and you just went the wrong way slightly and just suddenly went out of focus. That'd be a nightmare.
No, I think I did enjoy the film. But again, like I said, I think there's a moment where it's not even that it's being quirky, it's trying to be funny. Yeah. And to me, it doesn't suit, really.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's such a tiny bit as well, and I really hate that it stuck with me. Yeah. Is when they're walking away and
I know exactly what we're going to say here.
Yeah. The woman says, "Oh, I'll give you $20 if you go into this mother
meeting."
And instead of just kind of like turning around, they kind of do this like double take almost, where they just like almost get pulled back in. And I was like, even for them, that's just too much.
It just feels. I think they just do things that feel. Like I get that they're being quirky and they aren't real people. These aren't realistic people. But sometimes it just, as you say, it just goes too far, and it just feels like this isn't what anyone would do. Not even like, it doesn't even feel like what these characters would do. It just doesn't. It just feels like it feels written. I think that's the best way of describing it, at least for me, is that it feels like it's been written by someone.
One scene that I did actually love, I just kind of remembered now, is when they go to that old guy's house and they have to pretend.
That's very good, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's essentially what Old Dolio has just never experienced before, and she's liking it. It's really weird because they're not doing anything.
I was also very confused about what the film was about until I feel like the film doesn't actually tell you what it's really about until the final shot. That one shot where it sort of tracks backwards when they're in the store, I think that's when it really tells you what the film's about. I feel like everything else is it's something I felt I didn't know what the main plot was, like the main thread was. You have all these subplots. I was like, okay, but which one is the sort of emotional core that I'm supposed to be connecting to the most? Because there's so many odd things going on. I don't know what I'm supposed to be latching onto more.
I think I would say I latch more onto Old Dolio's just the fact that she's just lived without human.
This is where I think the film gets a bit confused in itself, because I think she's lived without contact, but I feel like it's the end of it saying, well, I don't want to spoil it, but I think it's saying one thing, but then I think there's another thing about the parental side of it. I don't know, I think it gets a little bit muddled in itself.
Unless you just take both of them and see it more as like Old Dolio escaping this kind of life, one that's prevented any kind of affection, not just the parental. Yeah. But you are right, I do understand that.
Yeah,
maybe just because I just latched more onto the parental side of things.
Yeah.
Especially with like sort of the dancing bit, especially. It's quite a very nice moment.
It is.
As weird as it is a nice moment.
Well, I think that's when these sorts of quirky films work, is when you have these really nice sort of emotional moments. But yeah, what else did you want to talk about then? So you saw One Night in Miami, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
What do you think of
that? No, it was really good. And we spoke about this. There should be more movies like this.
Yeah.
I know it seems kind of like strange to sit here. It's like, like 4 historical figures all meeting in a hotel room. And obviously it's based on a play. It's very talky. So yeah, like who doesn't want to watch a film that has Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Sam Cooke and Malcolm X? Like, it's just a really interesting concept.
Yeah.
Obviously you have to tread a lot of water with it. because they're all very, very important people.
Yeah.
But it essentially turns into this discussion of sort of that kind of civil rights movement and how what each individual is doing is either helping or, to some of the others, is sort of hindering. Essentially, the biggest conflict there is Sam Cooke and Malcolm X. Because Malcolm X is obviously very outspoken. Sam Cooke, to Malcolm X, makes a lot of pandering songs about love and stuff like that white people will like. But I think it's performed so well, and I think, like we said, they need to make more like it.
I said this to you, didn't I, about how I think it's such an easy concept to just make a series of one night in, and then you just choose a city and you just take 4 famous people and put them in a room together. And I think you could get so much originality as long as you get good people onto that. You could get so much originality and like just fun out of it, like just pure enjoyment of just. Well, it's almost like fantasy booking.
Yeah, literally,
isn't it? That's basically what it is.
But this is based on Kent Powers' play, who he also wrote the screenplay.
Who directed it?
Regina King.
Yes. Yeah.
So what I was about to say is that I think it's because it's such a talky script, and we've seen this plenty of times with movies based on plays. You have to fill the space. And Regina King is really understated. Like, she's so good with the camera. Essentially, like, there's a couple of spots where you can really see the play come out, where like Sam and Malcolm are shouting at each other, and the two are just like wandering off across the apartment. And it's kind of like, okay, that feels more like a stage play, but she's really good at filling that space. And considering it's a debut as well. Yeah. It's really fantastic. And it's a pretty brave thing. It's just such a talky script as well. You have to keep it entertaining, and she does it really well.
Well, I'm really glad
I have
to
to
hear
say,
that.
just also, I believe his name's Odom Jr. He played Sam Cooke, and he's one of the people from Hamilton as well. Yeah. He performs A Change Gone Come. Right. And it's amazing. I think it's just a really interesting discussion, really. It's not trying to say that Sam Cooke he's done nothing, and like Malcolm X, was just too outspoken or whatever. Like, it's not about that. It's more of a celebration, while also having a bit of a discussion. Yeah. Because they're 4 different people, but they're all fighting that same battle. And I think it's just a really important, almost like celebration of it. Yeah. And it's done very well, I think. So I'm going to throw another film at you. I'm going to chuck a few in the row that I didn't manage to see. So Never Gonna Snow Again, which was it's the Polish entry for the Oscars. Yeah. For next year. The more I thought about it, the more I liked it, actually. Yeah. Essentially, you begin to see the sort of social satire of it. It's essentially this guy appears in the mist with nothing but a massage table. And then he goes to Warsaw to get his immigration papers, where he then hypnotizes the immigration person and gets his stamp, essentially stamps it himself. And then it goes to like the bulk of the movie, where he's basically in this like gated community where he's like, he is to them second-class citizen, but they all seem to like him because he's got these almost like healing powers, whether it's through like just moaning about the mundanity of being a bloody housewife or something. But then he becomes kind of like a healer, and he becomes really important to them. And I think it's up for interpretation what you take away from the ending. But no, it's really good, and it's actually really funny at times. Yeah. He essentially only really connects to like a certain few, and while it can feel a little episodic, it just some of them are really funny. There's one where essentially, because he's a masseur, he can also hypnotise people. And sometimes he just hypnotises them, and then at one stage he starts doing silent ballet in their house, and the kids walk in and they're just like that. Like watching him, he's just doing ballet around the house with no music. But no, I think it's big on message, but it's got a lot of personality as well.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm really sad I missed that one. Another one I'm really sad I missed as well. Actually, was on the first day because fucking work. Was Mogul Mowgli.
Oh yeah.
That was first day. Like that was
It was like such a long time ago.
Yeah, it was only just over 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, just over a week ago.
No, it was a really good.
2 weeks ago. Oh, fucking.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
2 weeks. That first day was strong because you had Mogul Mowgli and Painter and the Thief.
Mogul Mowgli was really good. I guess to me, essentially, it's about a grime artist essentially who has become very big and kind of almost like lost contact with his heritage, I guess, and then he has to go home, and he gets this debilitating disease.
Where is it? Sorry, where's he from?
Well, he's from Britain.
Right.
He's British Pakistani.
Oh, okay.
So
right.
essentially, he has to go home and goes to the hospital where he gets this disease, which basically impairs like tissue and stuff, so he can't walk. And it's really interesting. I guess I thought personally, because I didn't know that much about it before, I did a bit of reading, I guess, but I kind of, because I'm interested in that kind of music, I thought maybe it'd be like that. But no, it's more about his heritage, more in like what it means to represent that heritage. You know, he's a rapper who raps a lot about where he comes from, but he's never really there. He's
but lost
really
his
home,
identity.
Basically. And I mean, it's performed so well by Riz Ahmed. But I think because it was the beginning of the festival and pretty much watched like an average of about 3 movies a day. Yeah. It's beginning to sort of go a little bit.
Yeah.
But,
well, I was going to say one that I think we both suffered with the time was Nocturno, which was the film that was sort of on the border of Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and just quite a lot of places in the Middle East, wasn't it?
Yeah, essentially. We're just trying to show us sort of like what daily life is like.
Yes.
And has become, I guess.
Yes. And I both think we agree it was very powerful.
Yeah.
But it's also one of the slowest things I've ever watched in my life.
Yeah, it was an extremely slow watch, and to put that on at 8:45 in the morning.
8:45 in the morning, and it's nearly 2 hours long, and it's essentially just really beautiful, but like beautiful in quite a lot of them are heartbreaking, striking, and affecting. Yeah. There's no narration. There's no interviews. There's no real characters. You follow some people for a little bit, but then you're on to something else.
Yeah, I mean.
The highlight for me was the donkey, obviously.
Of course, the donkey in the street was the best thing.
No, that was heartbreaking.
I guess there's like a family and then about a young boy who goes out to work.
Yeah.
Comes home and essentially falls asleep in the living room with his family.
Yeah.
And then there was these people doing the play.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. And then you also have the military as well. Yeah, the military people.
I think a lot of it was very beautiful. Like placement of the camera is so important there. And
absolutely.
It nailed it every frame.
I think we both agree that it was. It's been slightly tainted just purely because it was so early, and I didn't look it up before going into it. Most of the films I watched, I was like, cool, I'm just going to go in knowing as little as I can. Mm-hmm. But for that, it was so slow that it was kind of like.
Yeah. If that would have been about 3 or 4 hours more, waited until we watched it, I think we would have been fine.
Well, it's not even just that for me. If I knew what I was going into, I think I could have prepared myself for it a bit better. Yeah. Not knowing what I was going into and not realising what I was I think like it's a film that a lot of people should watch if you have the patience for it, but you need to know that you need a lot of patience for it. And it does reward you for having having that patience, but it is difficult to watch it before 9 o'clock in the morning.
That is literally the only thing, and that's more just our fault, really. Because we obviously were very tired.
Yes. I'm going to talk about one that I don't think you saw for a bit, and then you can go for another couple of ones that I didn't see. Zanka Contact. I don't believe you saw that.
No, I didn't catch that.
Which was a pretty fascinating film, actually, for me. So it's not a documentary. It's a written piece, and I've never seen, I don't think, at least to my knowledge, I've ever seen a true Moroccan film before.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing I think we'll both agree for this festival. It's really opened our eyes to cinema from around the world that I don't think we've ever seen from. And I think Zanka Contact was really fascinating for me because it just opened my eyes to a lot of Morocco. It's set in Casablanca, and I think if you say Casablanca to most people, you think of the classic noir kind of love story kind of thing. Yeah. but it's nothing like that at all. You've basically got it starts off in the UK, and you've got this musician who was once famous, who essentially he's a heroin addict, and he ruined his voice by injecting heroin into his throat. Like he ran out of veins essentially it could inject into, and he ended up injecting it into his throat and lost his voice, so he sort of faded into obscurity, and people there's this whole thing of people didn't realize he was still alive, and he owes someone, like I think as a bar owner, I don't think he's ever explicitly actually stated who it is, but he owes someone money who has basically said, I want the rights to, your famous songs, and then you're going to go back to Casablanca and I'm never going to see you again. So that's what happens, but he doesn't want to go back there because he's got accustomed to this lifestyle here and stuff. And then it switches to...
So what's the motivation then? Why does he want him to go back to Casablanca?
Oh, sorry, it's because he owes him shitloads of money.
Oh, okay.
He owes him tons of money, and his sort of thing is, you're going to give me the rights to all your songs, and then you're going to disappear.
Oh, so that's why you have to go.
Yeah, I want you to disappear, and no one's going to question why I own the rights to your songs. Sorry, I didn't explain that very well. No, but then he goes to Casablanca, and you're following a prostitute in a car, in a taxi, and she's telling this sort of long-winded joke to this guy about a car crash, and then she gets in a car crash with the musician. She sort of suffers quite a bad head injury. He's all right, but he bought some heroin when he got into the country, and he literally was about to inject it before it crashed and missed himself, like missed stabbing it in his throat, but he loses his heroin in the process. And they sort of start up a bit of a bizarre relationship, and then it kind of turns into like a romance love story.
Okay.
It's a bit gritty. It's very grimy, because she essentially works and lives in a whorehouse, and you've got this quite grimy, horrible man running the house, but he's a little bit nice as well. Like he sort of has brought up this kid who was bought a child of one of the prostitutes.
Kind of like tough exterior, but there's a heart somewhere in there, or is it?
No, there is that, but I think the film isn't perfect because I don't think it balances as well as it thinks it does, because he has this you see the heart more towards the end when you get to know a little bit more about where this kid come from. He's not really a kid now. I don't think it ever explicitly says his age, but he's probably early 20s, and he nicknamed him Obama because that's when they started getting a bit of this kid and this guy started getting a bit of a relationship, was during the presidential elections, and he thought he looked a little bit like Obama, and that was the joke. And there's this bit of the heart there and stuff, but the guy is fucking awful. He's a mean bastard. He does some really awful things throughout. So I think a lot of the film struggles with that a little bit, and I think the low budget and lack of experience means that the grit doesn't always work super well. It feels a little bit like a soundstage sometimes,
right?
Because I think it probably some of the alleyways and stuff I think are sound stages, and you can, especially at night when you've got these neon signs, it feels like you're watching a film from the 40s or 50s,
right?
But on like a 4K camera, so it doesn't work that well.
Yeah.
And then there's also this really bizarre bit at the end where it turns into like a Moroccan Western for about 20 minutes. It just literally comes out of nowhere. They're like running away, and then they're in this desert, and then it's like there's literally like Western spaghetti Western style music.
Oh, right.
And there's a bit of a shootout and some stuff goes on. And it's very odd. I think it's worth watching because there's loads of interesting things in there. And culturally, I think it's got quite a lot of interesting stuff to say. I don't really know what the message is, though. Like, coming out the other end, I was a bit confused what the message is. But I don't know. I also think, not to rag on it too much, I also think his depiction of heroin addiction isn't great, because he goes for like 10 days without taking anything. And the only real drawbacks he has is he occasionally has flashbacks to something awful that happens in his past that he sort of reveals at the end. He has some flashbacks to that, and then he just goes a bit sort of like, he loses his focus a bit and collapses maybe. And I just, not that I've ever really had first-hand experience with heroin addiction.
Yeah.
but it just doesn't feel like you feel.
I guess it really depends on sort of like obviously the way we see it in films.
Yeah,
it's a much more grueling thing.
I don't think it's necessarily that. It's just that like literally it'll do that and then
like
it'll forget.
Second
thing. I don't think it really.
You just thought, oh, now would be a good time to.
Exactly. Like there's literally like a between those sequences. It doesn't really. He's a bit sort of skinny and fatigued and stuff like that. But there isn't really much else to it than that. And I feel like they purely gave him the heroin addiction to give him a reason to lose his voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I really kind of feel like that's it. And it doesn't really. That doesn't really come up enough to justify.
The initial idea of a musician that loses his voice through drug addiction is really interesting.
But it doesn't really explore the drug addiction well.
If it was like I said, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But if the movie started with that, I think I'd be pretty interested in seeing the direction of that.
There's tons of interesting stuff that goes into it. So it's a really interesting film, and it's so interestingly made because I haven't seen a film like, as I say, I haven't seen a true Moroccan film before. So it's got a really, for me, a unique voice, and I think it's worth watching. It's a little long. It's like 2 hours long.
Okay.
But I mean, I think it's worth watching, and it's got a great soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And like the music that they do as well, because he basically, one of the reasons why he sticks around with her is because she's got a great voice. So he's sort of thinking, I'll play the guitar because he's a really good guitarist, and she can be my vocalist. She's not that great. She's good, but she's not that great. But I actually kind of think that works for it. Because it humanises it. Because there's certain elements where you kind of get a little bit of A Star Is Born, of this faded, washed-up musician finding someone who's kind of going to revitalise his career, and then there's this romance in it.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that she's not the most amazing thing ever.
Yeah, it's not like Lady Gaga standing on a stage and it's just blowing up a crowd of people away.
Honestly, it pisses me off. Like, it's a lovely scene, but like when she just comes out and suddenly is like that good, it's like that just it just takes me out the film. Yeah. Whereas she isn't. She's like really good, but she's not like that good.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take me out of the film, because there's a bit at the end where he's trying to get her to record the song and stuff, and I think that's when you kind of get this really like, because it's called Zanka Contact, because Zanka Contact is basically what they call street fighting. Like I'm going to give you the Zanka Contact is I'm going to punch you in the face with the
knuckle
knuckle
way
duster.
off here, but visually, is it similar to a Morris Peros, or is it not as like shaky as that?
No, it's not as shaky as that. No,
because that's what I've got in my head. And I don't know what
it's not really. No, there is some handheld. I would suspect quite a lot of it handheld, but it's not shaky at all.
Okay. Maybe it's because you said they get connected by a car crash.
Yeah, that's again. That I think the car crash isn't great, because I think a lot of it is budget restraints and lack of experience. But I can't remember what the name of the person who did it, but I'm really interested to see where they go, because I think it was I believe it was a debut.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really strong debut.
Yeah.
So what else did you want to throw out into there? Striding into the Wind was, I thought, really fascinating.
Yeah. Again, that's sort of gone from my memory a little bit, but no. I think the more I read about it, and like the more I sort of thought about it afterwards, the more I liked it.
Yeah.
We obviously talked about like what it was actually talking about.
Yeah, because I think for me, I remember watching it and just coming out the other end, not in the same way that Zanka Contact confused me, but I wasn't entirely, because I understood Striding into the Wind, but I wasn't quite sure what I thought the message was. It wasn't like Zanka Contact, where I think too many things happened and it kind of confused itself a little bit. I didn't get confused by Striding into the Wind. I just wasn't entirely sure what it was saying. But you had a much better idea of what you thought it was saying. Yeah,
well, to me it was about, sort of the free spirits, if you will. It's almost like how they've become a dying breed in, a world that they don't really have a place in. And these two characters are essentially the last of that kind of breed, the people that don't really, jobs are exhausting, they don't need it, they just kind of want to do what they want, get money when they can, and just do what they want, essentially. And
just for anyone who doesn't know, this is set in China as well. Yeah. Where is it? Modern day China? I can't remember, I can't, because, I was reading something about it being influenced by 90s China, but I can't remember if it was like, it's definitely not set during the 90s, but I couldn't remember if it was set during the noughties or if it was now.
I'm not ssure because it is obviously about the director's sort of own experiences. So
I think that's right.
Yeah, it might be. But you know, I like this idea that, but it doesn't say like free spirits are missed in this world.
Yeah.
It's that free spirits almost, people don't like them in this world, and they almost just don't have a place anymore.
Yeah.
You notice sometimes when like the two central characters essentially are, anytime there's a big group thing,
Yeah.
those two are always left.
Yeah.
You know, at the end when they're asking off this big picture of all the people on set, and then it's just those two on their own. You know, I think the more I thought about it, the more I really liked it. And I think for me the free spirit thing, you know, the end with the shots of the horses, kind of for me was sort of like free spirits in the wind, you know, in the field, because obviously they're constantly chasing this like Inner Mongolia, which is like just a beautiful place where you know, horses roam free and stuff, or what he thinks is where horses roam free. And
that's what I thought was an interesting sort of thing for it, is that he goes there and he doesn't find what he thinks he's going to find. Like he's this whole time he's thinking he's going to go there and he's going to sort of find himself or find his place in the world, and he doesn't.
Yeah. It's also interesting as well. I mean, again, just to go a bit more what it's about. Essentially, a young film student, he buys a Jeep, and this Jeep then almost becomes like a beacon of possibility, almost. Like, you know, you can go anywhere in a Jeep. I mean, it's kind of, you know, what the Jeep's all about, really.
Well, that's what's quite interesting. What happens to it at the end?
Yeah,
which is, I think, that's kind of what I got from it as well. About you know, the whole saying that the world doesn't really accept them, is that, you know, he rides his Jeep and it eventually breaks.
Yeah.
In the off-roading territory that it's built for.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I feel like that's a nice sort of reflection of his character, because when he goes to Inner Mongolia, they get the film done that they're there to do, but he doesn't get from it what he thinks he's going to get from
it. Well, essentially, I don't know if you noticed this as well, but in the last like half an hour of the film, you notice that his expression changes. His friends doesn't. His friends is very sort of like free-spirited still.
Yeah.
But you can almost feel like he knows that what he wants is just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting, that kind of character change where you just see him, he just almost looks like depressed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when you are in the movie, when you're watching it, it's difficult to fully understand what it's talking about. But I think once you really think about it, and you know, you've done, you finished, and you have time to sort of let it sink in, it's really good. It's really effective.
Yeah, I really, really loved it. It just took me a little while to get around what I thought they were really trying to say from it.
Apparently as well, basically. I read that because it was at Cannes as well, or it was picked for the postponed Cannes.
Yeah.
Essentially, a production company picked it up before they'd even seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating.
A lot of faith.
Well, I think it's
director.
What's really, I was going to say, because this is his debut, and I saw a really interesting article with him about the time that it got picked up at Cannes. That was talking about, someone said to him about, you know, do you think this is going to do wild, you know, bits in the award circuit? Do you think this is going to be China's Parasite? And he was basically saying no. He was like, I don't think it's anywhere near that good. Which I thought was it's nice thing to hear a filmmaker be like, oh, my film is, you know, because normally if someone comes out, oh, this film's incredible, I'm going to win it, I hope I'm going to win this, I'm hoping I'm going to win that. He was like, the fact it got picked for Cannes blew my mind. Yeah. When you can hear the modesty in him, it's fascinating. But he was talking about how he thinks China's still got a way to go to be accepted by the rest of the world, cinematically, because they haven't been able to make films like other countries. Like he's saying with South Korea specifically, they've been able to make the films they want for quite a while, and the world's been seeing them. So Parasite winning Best Picture was sort of this amalgamation of things happening for years and years and years. And he was saying that he thinks this new, I think he even used the term new breed of directors and, you know, creatives in China is hopefully
like a new wave of
he's hoping that they're going to start the motion for China to start getting that notoriety as well, which I'm super excited to see, because I don't think China has as much cinema as places like Japan and South Korea and other areas of Asia.
They have films that have come from there, but in terms of sort of international success, you think in martial arts movies. It's not you know, Soaring into Wind, or, you know, one of our personal favourites, In the Mood for Love. That's a Chinese film. We obviously love Wong Kar-wai, but that's because we watch movies and
Yeah.
we love him. It's just fantastic movies. We don't
Yeah.
know if lots of people have seen his movies.
Well, it's not like Bong Joon-ho. It's like you could look at Bong Joon-ho and be
Yeah.
like, that's the director from Korea that
Yeah.
everyone knows.
Yeah.
Most people have seen a film by Bong Joon-ho now,
Yeah.
whether it was Snowpiercer or Parasite.
Yeah.
Many other things he's done. But so I think now would be a good time to just sort of, before we start talking about some of our other favourites at the end, we should just quickly talk about some ones that we some ones that we saw that we didn't have as much resonance as some of the other ones. One for me was, I know I liked it more than you, but After Love, I thought that was pretty good. It's the one about the English woman who converted to Islam for her husband, and then finds out her husband has a secret family in France.
Yes.
I think we both agree it doesn't have the emotional impact it thinks it has. I liked it more than you did. I still think it has emotional resonance. I think the performances are really great.
I think the performance is fantastic.
Yeah. I just think there's a couple of bits throughout that just don't, like we were talking about the other films earlier, it didn't, like with Kajillionaire earlier, it doesn't, some of the things the characters do just don't feel like how people would actually act in that situation.
I just felt sometimes it felt like one of these things where the film thinks that something doesn't need to be said.
Yeah.
Like all the time though. And sometimes to me it felt like maybe you should actually try and say something.
Yes.
But yeah, again, I enjoyed the film. I thought it performed fantastically.
Yeah.
And some of the bits that are, it's not as emotional as I think it wants to be.
Yeah.
But some bits do still get you.
Yeah.
But I just don't think it was as effective as I think it wanted to be.
So another film we both saw was Cicada.
Yeah.
Which is, as we've Googled, is a super family of insects. I guess it sort of makes sense with what happens, but I think it's trying to be like, what's the word? Like pretentious indie film.
Yeah.
The film's very pretentious. Not necessarily in a bad way throughout. I think I liked it.
I did it. I really liked it. It feels very, I don't know if it's the right word to use, but bohemian.
Yes.
Like, that sort of like, not offbeat, but it's basically indie is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Just feels like, but it's really interesting and very personal movie.
Yes, yeah, because the background behind it is that it's about the sort of a gay guy who's coming to terms with his sexuality, and then meeting someone, and they have sort of a relationship in themselves. And one of them has had to deal with the fact that he hasn't told his dad, so he's got to sort of figure out how he's going to do that. And the other one has to come to terms with his first sexual experience was being molested.
Yeah.
But both the people, sort of the main characters in it, are the people that the story is based off of. They wrote it themselves about their own experiences. And I think that makes it, I just think it makes it have far more importance because it's kind of like them coming to terms with what happened in themselves.
Well, I mean, if film is anything, it gives you an ability to project your own feelings onto a film. And this is the biggest example of it,
yeah,
really.
Exactly.
And I think some bits are really great.
You can feel the love for each other in it as well.
Can,
Knowing that going into it, I do think it makes it a little bit like when you see them for the first time. I don't know if they're both actors. I think they both have acting experience, but I don't think they're both professional actors. You can see a little bit when you see them both for the first time that they know it. There's chemistry already there. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't feel like strangers meeting for the first time. But I don't think it necessarily matters because that's such a brief part before they actually have their relationship and they start having their relationship troubles and stuff like that. I think it's really great. I think it's an important film as well. I think it's important to have more gay representation in cinema. I think it's a great example of it.
After I watched the movie, I read IndieWire's review.
Yeah. Really
good review, actually. They made a really good point, which I agreed with, was that very often, maybe not so much now with like so much indie cinema, but in the past when there has been a movie, even if homosexuality is being represented, it usually has almost like a doomed ending. Yeah. But this was almost a very uplifting way to sort of bring it all together. And I did really like it. But you're right, it does give off that very pretentious vibe.
Yeah, I don't think pretentious necessarily has to mean it's bad.
Strong word. I would say.
But it has that. It's slow. It's
one bit that I don't know if it was done on purpose, You know, at the beginning when he's talking to his friends, and she says, "Oh, you're back on the dick."
Yeah.
She says it really aggressively,
Yeah.
as though it's like a drug.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand, because she's obviously not. She's not an important character.
No, she doesn't come back again, I don't think.
But she makes it sound like what he's doing is bad.
Yeah,
I don't think what he is doing in terms of like the fact that he's just sleeping with endless people with no connection, because he doesn't feel any connection.
Yeah.
Unless he's drunk, basically. That's interesting.
Well, no, he gets drunk because that's the only way you can have a sexual experience.
Yeah. That's interesting, but the way she says that,
I don't think it's meant to be.
I don't think it's meant to be, but it just came across like that.
Yeah.
That's all.
I'm going to throw another film out there. I don't think you've seen it. The Salt in Our Waters.
No, I didn't.
No, the Bengali film. It was interesting. I think it's another one where it's a little bit like Zanka Contact. It's really interesting to watch it from a cultural perspective because I've never seen a Bengali film before.
Yeah.
So, and then it goes, it's about a sculptor who moves to a tiny fishing village in the middle of basically nowhere, to sort of work on his next sculptures. Being being where it is, the people are Islamic, and because of that, they're very, very, I don't know what the word would be, not necessarily authentic Islamic, but like original, sort of traditional Islamic, which means that they are very against idols, and they mistake his sculptures for idolizing people. And you have this conflict throughout between him and the chairman of the village. It's good in some parts. I think it's far too slow because there's just not a lot happens. Like, there's lots of moments, there's kind of interesting moments where you think there's going to be this moment of big conflict, and then it doesn't come of it, and it's kind of meant to be this sort of meditation on man versus man, and traditional versus new, and man with nature and things like that, because they sort of the fisherman and the chairman, they aren't having a good first crop of fish coming in, and they believe it's sort of like Allah punishing them they think it's Allah punishing them for bringing this guy in who's making these idols, and he's just trying to say to them, it's not, this is climate change causing issues with the planet, that means that you can't be like this forever. And there's some interesting stuff, but I think it's far too slow. I don't think it's got the impact it thinks it has as well. I know we've said that about a few films, because it's a debut again. So I think it's saying more than it actually is. Like, I think it thinks it's got like these big messages, but it doesn't really explore them. It kind of just has things happen, and it doesn't really go in detail in them, I think. You saw Rose the Love Story, didn't you? The British horror film.
A nice little short film. Almost 86 minutes. Not a short, but it's a short feature film. It was really good. It's essentially, it is a horror film, but it's more of a love story. Essentially, Rose and her husband Sam, who's played by Matt Stokey.
Stokey?
I think it's Stokoe.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll go with that.
I mean, that's a better guess than what I would say. So.
Who he also wrote the screenplay for it.
Yes.
But it's very much about them living in a secluded wilderness because Rose has this disease, which it's not exactly coy about it. It doesn't show to the full extent of how bad it can get. But essentially, she just eat raw animals and drink blood. So. Kind of what's the deal, but it's more about like that sort of undying love that you have for someone, and the fact that the things you're willing to do for them in order to keep them safe. That's essentially what it's about. And really, the horror isn't until the last 5 minutes. There's always this eerie tension. Which is great.
Well, that's what I thought as well. That I think something I got from it as well is just the lengths you'll go for someone that you love. Yes, I think like an excellent part of it, and I think he's great in it. I think
it's a nice idea. I mean, I don't know how true that is, but I'm sure there are people who would do that for people. I
wouldn't. No, I think unlike other films that we've spoken about that are like reaching for really, really high heights and don't quite reach it. I don't think Rose is trying to reach for really high heights, but almost excels in what it's already doing.
But I think the last fight, I would have liked to have seen more, like essentially someone gets caught in one of Sam's traps and breaks a leg. And they obviously welcome her. Sam doesn't welcome her.
Yeah.
Rose welcomes her more.
Yeah.
But Sam obviously spent like basically his entire life, or however many years, making sure Rose is safe from other people.
Yeah.
And the ending, the last like 5 minutes, was just like complete, just everything's amplified, like horror wise. I won't spoil it for you, but I would have liked to have seen more of the almost like the interference from this one person.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't get enough to really make her excel as a character. She's just she has got problems. Don't get me wrong, and you can relate to her. But I think the ending's effective.
Yeah.
But you also kind of want to see more of the person.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's still a fantastic film.
Yeah.
But it's just my own personal thing. I just want to see more of that interruption.
Talking about the only sort of like so the BFI London Film Festival has got access, like you have free access to a library of shorts that we haven't been able to experience yet, that I'm sure we'll do soon. But one short that was actually part of it was The Human Voice, the Tilda Swinton one, which is an interesting film.
I mean, I like the director.
Yes. I said to you...
Almodovar.
Yes.
I'm impressed.
I'm impressed you remembered that, yeah. I think it's really interesting. It's based on a play, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell.
It's definitely.
It's a very play-like thing. I said to you, although that it has its issues, it's very theatrical, melodramatic, and she's very doing, the big sort of...
It's very that idea of the one-woman show.
Yes.
You get that a lot from it.
But I said to you, I think I really loved it. I thought it was great.
I think it was good, yeah.
I think it would adapt well into a feature length if you expand on some of it. I think there's elements you could definitely expand on and still have the same ending.
I've got a feeling there are some directors who have also sort of adapted it or taken an interest in it.
Oh, yeah?
I can't remember exactly right now.
But I think it's an interesting... I mean, Tilda Swinton's great in it.
She's fantastic. I still think she's one of the best actresses.
Yes,
she's just so unique.
Yes,
I think she's able to do whatever.
I'm not entirely sure I understand why she's there, because essentially what it is, she's in a house.
In a soundstage.
It's like a built soundstage inside a warehouse. And she doesn't leave until the end, I guess. But
I guess if you're familiar with the directors of the works as well, you know that he's got very vibrant colours and stuff, and that's exactly it.
It's beautiful.
It made me laugh. It's just sort of like everything Tilda Swinton wears in it. You kind of think like she could definitely just rock that in real life. It's just there's like Chanel purses and stuff like that. Yeah, I really loved it.
And essentially, it's just her on the phone, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why the one-woman show thing. You have to really believe that she's on the phone to someone. She might well have just been talking to herself, which makes Swinton even better.
I imagine that's probably how they did it. She's just talking to herself.
Yeah.
Which
I suppose if you want to be, it seems like it's trying to be very not. I guess it's respecting the source material. So I imagine I can see them doing that.
Yes.
But it's a good job Tilda Swinton is there.
Yes. What else should we talk about? You watched Delia Derbyshire, The Myths and Legendary Tapes, didn't you?
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's good. I think the sound in it is fantastic because it's essentially what she's known for. She's essentially a woman who, very intelligent, mathematician, didn't see it as music, she saw it as sound, and she wanted to create sound, essentially, that people had never heard before. Obviously famous for the Doctor Who thing.
Yeah.
But it's not really about that, it's more about how she is she's a very complicated woman and stuff like that. And it is a good film, it's a very good documentary.
Yeah.
Like I said, the sound's fantastic because it uses these undiscovered tapes that were found after she died.
Yeah.
And uses them as the soundtrack, which is really good. There is a bit where it gets essentially to recreate the story. They have someone playing Delia, they have someone playing her friends and stuff like that. And it kind of goes from these weird surreal moments where they just let the music play and she's on a bicycle going around this stage while people I don't know. And then it goes to just normal narrative and then to like interviews with people, and it's well put together, and the sound, like I said, the sound is very important there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it does justice to a woman that pretty much for years was never realised as like someone with true potential. Basically, she's incredibly intelligent. I think sometimes when it goes to that sort of them like recreating, it can feel a bit campy.
Yeah. So I've got 3 films in mind that I think we should close it out with. Is there any more that you want to mention before we?
No.
So I'll throw it to you for the first one. So
maybe.
What were you going to say?
There's 2 that I want to talk about. I don't think you watched.
Yeah, there's 2 here I was going to throw to you. So Supernova was the first one.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, I didn't manage to watch Supernova, unfortunately.
Yeah, Supernova is one of those films that I said this to you, in the wrong hands. That script and that just a story in general, it becomes very Oscar bait sort of thing. You know, it's about a gay couple who are on the road in England, and one of them has just been diagnosed with dementia. And the best thing about the movie is that it doesn't want to show like dementia as like its peak. It's about someone who's got it and it's starting to kick in, and it's more about thinking about what's going to happen in the future. And that's essentially, you know, these 2 people that spent their life together, and it's very coy with their emotion, which is the best thing about the movie. Essentially, until they're ready, the emotion doesn't come out really, and it's really well paced, and it's just so well balanced.
I'm right in saying it's Colin Firth and
Stanley Tucci.
Yeah,
2 of like veterans now. I guess.
Are they good?
They're fantastic. I mean, Colin Firth. I've always known, obviously he's a great actor, but he's never been someone that I've been like, oh, Colin Firth's in this, I have to watch this. Stanley Tucci actually underrated because he was a bit of a supporting actor, isn't he?
Yeah.
But the 2 of them together just blew me away. Fantastic. Yeah.
Another one was Relic.
Oh yeah. Wow, I keep forgetting about all these movies.
There's been you've watched more than I have because I had a lot more work, but between us we've watched a lot of films intensely in the last couple of weeks. So
I would say, actually, in terms of movies that surprised me, it's Relic. Relic is one that stuck with me quite a while after, and I understand that when people watch it, they may not actually like it. It has it's like a budgeted horror kind of thing, but what it's talking about is very brave. Again, it comes back to Alzheimer's, dementia, and essentially how that becomes a horror. They turn it into a movie horror, but it's done very delicately. And the ending says a lot about sort of like realities of that. You know, it's easy to run away, but you can't really. But yeah, it's pretty tense throughout the entire thing, and it doesn't rely on these like jump scares. It does occasionally, but I think every horror does now. But yeah, I think, in fact, if there's like, I won't say just like one movie definitively to say, but if you get a chance, it's a very easy watch as well. Almost, there's some very difficult scenes in it, but it still has that sort of like budget horror kind of connectivity to it. So I would definitely say people should watch that because it's really good.
So what else did you want to cover? Because I know there's one film we're to talk about at the end, but what are the other ones?
2 for me as well that stood out very much. One British film, Herself. Very, very good. And it surprised me as well from the director of Mamma Mia and Iron Lady to do such a personal film about sort of domestic abuse and how the system doesn't help women who have been affected by this. I think it's pretty, and essentially it's about a woman who sees an opportunity to just build her own house and create a new life, and that's what it's about. And there's always that looming thing of her ex-husband or boyfriend always coming back to ruin it, essentially. But it's a bit more than that. It gives it extra juice in the fact that he essentially takes it to court for custody, and there's this really, really powerful monologue that I won't spoil it, obviously, but it's essentially just about the system and how so wrong it is that she's on trial in this situation. But yeah, that one, there's a British one, that was great. And the last one was Irish one, Wildfire. Essentially how family trauma connects sort of siblings and stuff, and how it can affect people later on in life. really good. Another debut as well, which was.
There's been a lot of debuts this year. Yeah,
really
I think. I mean,
impressive.
BFI London Film Festival is always good for that, isn't it? They do make sure to highlight
Yeah.
up and coming talent.
But yeah, it's sort of this multi-layered, I would say, because it starts about like the tensions between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, and then it's set on the border.
Yeah.
But it's more about these two women whose mother died when they were young, and how it's kind of affected them in life. And essentially, I said this in the review actually, it's predictable where it's going to end, but it's not in a sort of, oh, well, that's just easy. There's almost like a fate. It has to come to this.
You knew
point.
it had to go to that.
It has to go to that point. And it's really effective. While some of it's a bit strange. There's a really weird dance sequence they do together in a pub.
Yeah.
Which is, it's not even dancing. It's like exercise almost. But no, I think really effective, and performance-wise again.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of good performances.
Yes, well, I was going to say, so the last film, I mean, there's a ton more films we could talk about. We haven't discussed every film we watched, but I feel like we could go on for so long talking about all the films.
Could.
So I feel like a nice way to round it out is to talk about one of our favourite films. I know we both really loved it, which was Another Round.
Yeah.
Druk? Is that what you say?
Druk.
Druk. Yeah. It's a Danish film.
It is, yeah. Thomas Vinterberg.
Yes, who did The Hunt.
And he's done a lot, but
well, The Hunt is just a.
I first learned about him obviously from the Dogma.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's an interesting director, and
he's worked with Mads Mikkelsen a lot, who's in this, who's your main character.
Yeah. He's they essentially haven't worked together since The Hunt.
Yeah.
And it's about almost like a theory, I guess, that humans have a blood alcohol deficiency of 0.5.
No, 0.05.
0.05, and in order to thrive, they need to make up that difference.
Yeah.
And essentially, for English teachers, high school teachers, test it.
Yeah, and they basically just keep rising their blood alcohol level to points where it gets a little bit silly sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean,
but that's kind of
movies about alcohol. Obviously, there's always going to be.
Yeah, I didn't mean silly. Much. I didn't mean the silly becomes movie. I mean what they're doing becomes
of course
stupid basically. Yeah. But I mean we both talked. I mean we talked about the performances. I think this is probably the best performance of the festival. I thought Mads Mikkelsen.
Maybe
you're making a face.
Maybe
it's probably what I thought was the best, just because I think there's so many sequences in it that rely on his performance.
Oh yeah,
they just would not work. That would probably be cheesy.
I don't know if I could definitively say right now that that's what I thought it was, but it's definitely up there.
Yeah. It's we talk about at the start when very early on he goes for a meal with his three friends, and it's the four of them that decide to do this experiment together.
Yeah.
They go for one of their birthdays, and he sort of realizes that he's become boring.
Yeah. Who wrote the review first? No, I wrote the review.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just trying to remember.
He realizes he becomes boring, and there's a sort of quite a long take where it's just stuck on his face, and he sort of starts revealing his emotions to his friends, and he just starts crying, and it's incredibly effective. Like it's such a good. I said to you after I watched it, I think it's my favourite scene in the whole film. It's so early on. I mean, there's loads of great scenes in it. It's so much fun. The film is, considering that it's essentially about alcoholism. It's really fun, but that sequence I found so powerful because so early on you understand so much about the character in this one sequence where you just realise he's become a shell of his fun, enthusiastic, sort of loving self. He's just become this dull man, and that's him sort of realising it, because you see it before that his history lessons are, because he's a history teacher, his lessons are uninspiring and the kids don't care.
He's just vacant, essentially.
All the time. He's vacant all the time, and when he realises it, I think it's a very powerful moment. But I know we have slightly different opinions about the end.
Yeah.
I still think I don't think it's bad. At all. It's just that I think the message got a little bit confused.
Yeah.
About because I think throughout it, it's giving you the very clear message that doing this is wrong, and then at the end, I feel like it's saying that he finally has this outburst, this emotion. He finally gets to that point but he's had to drink to get there.
I didn't see it as that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's. I mean, I know that alcohol is a very important thing in the movie, and it's. But I think for me, the ending's more about three people.
But I agree, this is what it's about, but I think this is something.
But what I'm saying, I understand where you're coming
yeah.
from when you say it gets muddled because they are drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
And they probably shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But in my head, that probably doesn't matter. It's about three people that have been looking for that missing deficiency or whatever.
Yeah.
And it just becomes more of a personal thing.
Yeah.
In order for them to sort of bridge themselves almost, become better people. And I think that thing he does at the end with the dancing.
Yeah.
I understand that there is drinking involved.
I feel like if you wanted to not confuse the message, you should have him not drinking there, though.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, though, because I mean, we won't spoil it because they're having a beer. They're having a beer for a very particular reason, and then they go outside to then have another beer for a very particular reason.
Yeah,
it's not like they're just in that scene, where they all just decide to get absolutely steaming,
and
they start stealing bottles from bars and stuff like that.
Funny.
And that is essentially
that's so funny when he's trying to pour. He's trying to pour the pint and realizes he can't.
Yeah.
Not the pint. He's just trying to pour a shot and he can't do it. So he just nicks the fucking bottle with the holders and everything as well.
That's essentially the point in the film where you realise that all their lives are just going to get worse because of this. They've just had one night which is terrible and they've become more dependent. But I think the ending is more important about the reason why they're drinking. Yeah. And obviously I don't want to spoil it. So
no, we shouldn't go into it too much. We just differ on that.
It's nice to talk about.
It's still a great. I still think it's a really great film. Yeah. It's not Mads isn't the only person who's good in it. All of his supporting cast are great. Yeah. I think it's pretty original as well.
Yeah.
And
you just have to agree that you're wrong.
All right, before we wrap it up, should we say what you think your favourite and what you think the best of the festival were? Because let's be honest, favourite and best aren't always the same. I know what my two are, and I wouldn't be surprised if yours is the same.
I would say best. I would rather say my favourite and then what surprised me the most.
Okay, I'm going to say favourite and best because I know which two it is for me. So
my favourite in terms of how much fun I was having watching it was David Byrne's American Utopia.
Exactly the same. That was my favourite as well.
And okay, yeah, best and one that.
Should we do that then? Best and then also one that surprised you the most.
Yeah, surprised me the most is
American Utopia. I mean, it did, but
it did, yeah. But I think just because I didn't know that much about it, it's probably a tie.
Yeah,
200 meters of relic for me. Yeah, I think
for me it's The Reason I Jump. Yeah. I didn't realise that was going to be as good. Yeah. I came out of it thinking, wow, that is genuinely one of the best documentaries I've watched in some time. Mm-hmm. So that surprised me the most. Mm-hmm. And what do you think's the best? I know for me the best was Possessor.
Yeah,
I didn't get to see some of the other ones that could go toe to toe with it, but for me, I came out the other end and just thinking, wow, that absolutely blew me away. I loved it. I thought it would be one of my favourites too, but I also just think the quality of filmmaking was just so superb. Like this is only his Brandon Cronenberg's second directed feature, and I just think that he's carved such a strong voice for himself already.
I would agree with you there.
Yeah.
I think Possessor would be my favourite. I think also Mangrove is probably close.
Yeah.
I think Possessor, I would give it to Possessor.
I think it's probably the best, yeah.
It's one that I was very excited to watch anyway.
Yes.
And it still surpassed everything I wanted.
Exactly.
So
I had exactly the same.
That's probably it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was our sort of summary of the BFI London Film Festival, from the press point of view at least, because there was some stuff that we didn't get to see.
Yeah.
There was another film from the Small Axe series. We didn't get to catch Ammonite as well, which made us both very sad.
It did.
But we did watch a lot of films and it was a great year. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to check out, all of our social pages, Real Reviewing on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. You can find us at realreviewing.com. And make sure you stick around and listen to the next few pods we're going to do. Yeah. Pods those we're going to cast. Cast those pods.
We're going to cast those pods, guys. Get involved.
Is there anything else you want to say at the end there?
No, it's cast them pods, mate.